So nice to see so many familiar faces. Please introduce yourself in chat, and we'd love to know the name of your organization and maybe just one sentence about it, because we have a lot of different organizations in the room. So introduce yourself on chat, your name, your organization, and maybe a quick sentence about what your organization does or what age group it serves. Got a lot of people coming into this meeting, which is terrific. I think you put the word funding in and all of a sudden everybody shows up. Very happy to have everyone here. Again, introduce yourself in the chat, your name, your organization, a sentence about your organization, and we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Petra Sultan. I'm the Director of Advocacy and Education for Thrive, the Alliance of Nonprofits for San Mateo County. And if you're here for the Children in Education Thrive Action Group, you are in the right place. So today we're going to be talking about funding both the state and the county level. And before that, I want to talk just a little bit about Thrive. So on the next slide, you will see some of what we do. We are over 200 organizations. We are cross-sector, membership-based. We do policy and advocacy, cross-sector collaboration, nonprofit capacity building. This shows up in a lot of different ways. One of the things that we are doing from our Thrive action groups is this one, the Children in Education. We also have arts and culture, basic needs and safety net, and environment and sustainability. And we also do a lot of support for nonprofits. So one of the things that is coming up next is we heard directly from nonprofits that there's a lot of confusion around what to do with this new COVID surge. So we pulled together quickly, which is why the name is Thrive Swiftly, an event that's tomorrow. Really to help nonprofits figure out what to do right now, because it's really confusing and it's hard, and we thought having some real good information would be very helpful. So Dr. Curtis Chan from San Mateo County Health will start by giving us an overview of where we are with the pandemic and what the latest science is. And then after that, we're going to have the Chief Operating Officer from Ability Path, Erin Montgomery, speak to talk about how they implemented and how kind of their process through what they're doing with the new surge, what the changes have been and what their decision-making process is. And then we'll have some time for sharing. So hopefully that'll be something that's really useful to a lot of nonprofits as far as just how to run the business side of it. What do we do with the surge? In addition, also tomorrow, our Environment and Sustainability Group is meeting. And very slowly the slides are changing, I can see that. There it is. We've been working with the over 150 organizations that work in some way or another on environment and sustainability in the county, and we've been working on getting together some collective climate goals. And we zeroed in on two things, and one is energy efficient homes and buildings. And the other one is transportation. So tomorrow we're going to be talking about energy efficient homes, and we're going to be talking about it with some of the nonprofits, that 5 of them, that are working on this in San Mateo County, to find out what kind of collaborations are already happening and what we can do to move this forward. You're all welcome to come to that. And I think we are ready for the agenda for today. So today, again, thank you so much for continuing to introduce yourself. Let us know what your organization is and what you're doing specifically in this space. We're going to start with Karin Huber-Levy, who's a commissioner for the San Mateo County Juvenile Justice Delinquency Commission, which, as you can imagine, very often is shortened to Jjdpc. To talk about some of the research that they've been doing in this space and some of the funding opportunities from the state level. And then after that, we'll have some discussion around that to find out where people are with the discussion and with the funding, and what we can do to get some of the funding to you. And then the second part, we will have Margot Grant Gold, who's a consultant for this San Mateo County and working on COVID recovery initiatives, as well as Peggy Jensen, who's the assistant county manager, speak about the funding that's going to come from the county through the American Rescue Plan Act. So again, thank you all for being here, and a special thanks to Karin, and I will turn it over to her for her presentation.
Thank you so much, Petra. I'm going to share my screen here. There we go. So thank you so much for inviting us to come and speak to the group today. I'm here with two of my co-commissioners, Tony Barrick and Deborah Talaria, and we would love to speak to you about some of the research we have been doing over the past year on after-school programs in underserved communities in our county. Why are we in this space? The mission of the Jjdpc is to advocate for programs and services to prevent youth from entering the juvenile justice system. And in some strategic planning that we've done over the past couple of years, we decided on some focus on some key aspirations, one of which is that children in underserved neighborhoods have convenient and affordable access to programs to engage and support them after school. The goal of the program, of the research that we did, the project that we did, ultimately is to advocate to fill these unmet needs for after-school programs in our county. We focused our research on communities with the greatest needs as identified by the 2019 study from the Community Collaboration for Children's Success. And you can see these areas: South San Francisco, Daly City, San Bruno, San Mateo, Redwood City, North Fair Oaks, and East Palo Alto. Not surprisingly, the communities with greatest needs also have the largest representation of youth who have been involved in the juvenile justice system. And from some very recent statistics provided by the probation department in their comprehensive annual report, of the 1,024 youth served by these programs in the last year, 75% resided in those communities with greatest needs. So our mission is pretty clear here. The research that we did starting about a year ago was to initially to catalog the providers who provide on-site and off-site daily programs to these communities. And that turned out to be about 40-ish organizations. When we sought to look more closely at the activities, the services, the hours provided by these organizations, we decided a good way to do it was to look at each school district. And when we did so, it provided some very interesting information as to how each school district sought to fill these needs through unique ecosystems of after-school summer programs. So in our report, we summarized the on-site, off-site daily programs, as well as some other resources that were offered to targeted groups within the community or on a more intermittent basis. We also sought to educate ourselves as to the funding and the stakeholders in this space in expanded learning in California. Some of the key findings from our research: all of the districts we looked at provided some level of programming, which was good news. But each district provided it in a very unique way. There weren't two districts that had kind of the formula down. And a lot of that came from historical relationships with CBOs, funding access. We also saw that the districts operate very independently. Not a lot of collaboration across districts. And the programs varied greatly in the quality and the depth of offerings. And within the wide range of providers that we found, CBOs and Parks and Rec were major sources of excellent, vital programs. Districts also play a very important role. We also found that there were barriers to access, not surprisingly: cost, the availability of scholarships, the knowledge of available financial aid was not always obvious to parents. Transportation could be an issue. Also, families in these communities were concerned with safety during the pandemic, and also immigration status. The demand for programs in all of these communities was greater than the supply. And we also saw repeatedly that school districts were a critical link to the community. Where do we see opportunities going forward? There is unprecedented new investment in expanded learning in California. And this new ongoing funding provided by the Expanded Learning Opportunities Program should play a role in radically changing opportunities for kids. 1.7 billion was the initial investment in 21-22. 1 million of that is ongoing funding. We know from the governor's proposed budget that it is proposed that an additional 3.4 billion will be added to this for 22-23. And this ongoing funding is planned to rise to $5 billion by 25-26 as a baseline. So that's the amount in the budget every year, unless it's taken away. More collaboration is also an opportunity. We saw through the pandemic that CBOs and school districts could pivot quickly to work together in unique and creative ways to serve their communities. And we think that there's a lot of opportunity among school districts too, to share best practices, benchmarking. We've also heard, we have been sitting in on the CDE Expanded Learning Division's fireside chats, which are fantastic sources of information. And we've heard most recently school districts who have started down this path of putting in place planning for these programs, that creative solutions are the way to go, to look for opportunities to get around these barriers to access and limits on programming. And there are opportunities to collaborate to get around these barriers. We are also excited to know about the potential role of a new resource at the County Office of Education for expanded learning. I've labeled this role Expanded Learning Coordinator, but I don't know what it would be called. But we see that there would be a wonderful opportunity to support the districts in infrastructure building. Some of the districts in the north of the county have relied on cities to provide some of the infrastructure for planning their after-school programming. Funding goes directly to the districts, so collaboration or further infrastructure is needed to optimize the use of this funding. And we are interested to see if this coordinating position could also include leading a collective impact initiative, something that we heard about from the Marin Promise Partnership last year in this group. A little bit about the Expanded Learning Opportunities Program. It's focused on transitional kindergarten to 6th grade. And as I mentioned, the funding goes to the districts, not to community organizations or cities. And this expanded learning is meant truly to be enrichment after school, before school intercession learning programs. Enrichment through hands-on engaged learning, not more of the same school day. And the ed code language is very specific, that the planning is to include community partners and to complement, not replicate, the school day. A little snapshot here of what this additional funding means for our communities in greatest need. And you can see the orange bars on top. The existing green bars, and green and blue in one case, were the ACES and 21st CCLC programs, which have been in place for years, and no additional funding had been provided for years for these programs. So they had stayed fairly static unless they had been reduced to certain districts for attendance issues. These new orange bars, in terms of Daly City, for instance, represents a $2 million increase on top of an existing $1.1 million budget. South San Francisco's budget went up 1.34 million from an existing 250,000, significant increase there. San Bruno Park tripled its budget. San Mateo Foster City School District, 7-fold increase. Redwood City doubled an almost $2 million budget. And you can see Redwood City was the only district that we looked at that in fact was accessing the 21st century funding, which I've been told by Josh Brady, who I believe is in on this call, that the program has changed and is a little bit more flexible in terms of access. So this could be a potential opportunity for other districts to take advantage of additional funding there too. Ravenswood, 3.5 times their budget prior to this. So really significant new investment here, which is very exciting. How can we help at the JJDPC? We would love to continue to offer our research as a resource to highlight potential opportunities and issues in districts and among the districts. we see our role as continuing to inform and educate elected officials and community leaders of the unmet needs and the nexus with the impact on juvenile justice. And we hope to continue to work with advocacy groups to gain support for further accessible and affordable programs for our communities with identified needs. I would be so happy to take any questions or to be part of a further discussion in this area. Also, I have to make a little pitch for the Jjdpc. If you are interested in finding out more information about becoming a commissioner, a link to our website and our email is here, as well as a link to our after-school program final report, which also appears on our website. So thank you very much for the opportunity to present today, and love to open this up for discussion and questions now.
Thank you so much, Karin. I would love to hear anybody who has comments, but also if anyone has heard about the funding from any of the school districts that they work with.
Hi, my name is Paige. I'm in East Palo Alto, and we had seen an email from Innovate Schools, and so we were kind of starting to try to figure stuff out, but we hadn't figured anything out yet. And I have to say, I still don't think I understand what I mean. I appreciate the information, but it's, I guess, are we, yeah. Anyway, very curious.
Rod?
Hi, thanks for that great presentation. You mentioned that you needed creative solutions around certain barriers. And then there was this phrase at the end, limits on programming. And I was wondering if you could expand on what the barriers were on those limits on programming.
Sure. What we found as a number-1 limit on programming was staffing, and then facilities. Finding facilities. But I think staffing is a huge challenge. And from some of the districts that we heard present the other day, the way they were working around some of that was collaboration across districts, like allowing children from different districts to participate in different programs, so that staffing provided perhaps by CBOs, where staffing is an issue at the schools.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
So curious, is this news to everyone, or everyone's very quiet? They have not heard from the school districts there's more money?
So as a community partner, do we approach the school districts, and who do you approach in the school district?
Hey, girl.
Karin, good to hear you. There you go.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm in an after-school program. Sorry. Staffing is a real issue, especially with COVID. So you may hear kids in the background, but I've approached my school district about this, and there was a big webinar this morning with lots of people from all over the state, from CAN, talking all about it. I don't think the school districts really know yet what they're going to do with the money, and it's different. There's a formula for every school district, how much they're going to get. Belmont River Shores is getting money more than they thought. I was the one who told them they were getting more than they thought, but I think it's still in process. There's been several other webinars about it though. So I think most school districts know that the money's coming. I just don't know if they know how to partner with their after school programs, or if they're going to use it themselves. Originally, Belmont said they're going to use it for summer school when they thought it was a really small amount, and then they realized it's a much bigger amount. So maybe they could partner with before and after school programs who already exist. So I think it's school district by school district, but I do believe that most school districts know about it. And I've been talking, you asked who to talk to. I spoke to the business managers who I've been speaking to.
Thanks, Karin. Amy?
Hi, so I guess I have a question. I know it was like in September, I was on a webinar with Innovate. I think Paige mentioned, and maybe you were as well. And we heard that there was going to be the big $5 million. Is that, do you know Petra, what I'm referring to, or Karin, do you remember, are you aware?
Actually, Innovate's on the call as well. Jose's here.
Who?
Yes.
Hi, Jose. Is Kendra still with Innovate as well?
She is.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I remember it was a little bit contentious, that call, but it was like, my takeaway was that it was all good news, but it hadn't really been sorted out. There was some report. I wasn't sure if that's the report Karin is mentioning as well, about the 40 after school programs, which what is that report? And, you know, is there
I think what also one of the things that to learn about it is about the Extending Learning Opportunity Program, that each school district receives an amount of money from the Extending Learning Opportunity Division at the California Department of Education. So, and I think this is what this was the email that was sent out from Innovate, is just informing about the amount of money that each district will receive from the Expanded Learning Opportunity. And there's been a lot of confusion because there's two different types of funding. So there's the grant and there is the program. So the grant was a one-time funding that happened, and then the program is a grant that happened every year. So like we actually had a webinar, and I know many of you were expecting. We are actually expecting to have another webinar with Michael Funk, directly target the nonprofits in the area. We had one where we invited districts, and I know I mentioned it to some of you about that webinar, but like that webinar was only for district staff, but we're gonna have another one with Michael Funk, who is the director of the ELO division at the California Department of Education, for nonprofits in the area, and he's gonna come and explain us about it. So, but one thing is, you know, as organizations, as you all are providers, you know, the ELO is not a funding that nonprofits can access to. They cannot apply directly to the state for this funding. It has to go through the districts. Mm-hmm. And there are some districts that already created their plan for the ELO. We've seen this across California, where districts are building their own after-school programming. And also, but we also been seeing districts that are using providers with these funds. And our main goal as Innovate was to create awareness of this money and funding that is out there in the district. And many of our parents have met already with people here in Redwood City, with people in East Palo Alto, and across, I would say across the state, to kind of like navigate how these funds are going to be used. We had conversations with the districts as well. We look into their plans. They share with us their plan. It's also in their website, and you can see how they're going to spend this money. And yeah, it's confusing because both fundings are called ELO, but one is a grant and one was the program. And the ELO grant was already given to the districts last year, and the ELO program is the one that was already given, but the plan, they're still working on the plan for the ELO program. Some of the districts, and some districts already are done with the plan. I don't know if that answered the question, but yeah.
Besides Karin, has anybody spoken to business manager, anybody in any of the school districts that you work with? So that might be a plan of action to find out what your specific school district. Unfortunately, as you know, there are 23 school districts in the county. Is that right? We probably aren't helpful there. You probably each need to go to the school district that you're working with and find out if they already have a plan for the funding. But I think, you know, our point is there's a lot of funding, and school districts might not be able to ramp up and do their own programming, and might be very grateful if you show up and say, hey, we already have a program, you know, use us. And some of you have strong relationships with the school district, and some of you, this might be an opportunity to get one.
Petra, may I say
That's-
something?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so the way that we were able to find out how much money districts were going to spend on through the ELO was reviewing their annual budget. Many of the districts across the county, at least the ones that we work on, they already had their budget on their website, and we were able to go there and find out how they were going to spend the money. And they should have the plan and everything there as well on their website. At least I know Redwood City has that, has their plan, and also they have the amounts in their annual budget for this year.
If I could just interject something there. One of the things that was confusing for us when we were trying to understand what was currently available on the school websites, there are program plans in place, but they are for spending that first grant money. And I don't think any of the schools have completed any of their program plans for the ELO program, which is the one really dealing with the after-school enrichment programs. So the ELO grant, so unfortunate that it's so confusingly named, the ELO grant program plans are all really to recoup lost learning time and close the learning gap. And they're an amazing resource to see how the schools are planning to spend that money, but they don't deal at all with this program, the ELO program. And those plans are not due right away. I think the CDE Expanded Learning Division just released their guide in September, and schools aren't required to file it right away. And in fact, this first year is seen as kind of a freebie year that they're not going to be audited for, so they have an opportunity to have more flexibility in their planning and their execution of their programs to start. So there is a real opportunity, I think, for some collaboration amongst the CBOs and the districts. And we really see a need in the north of the county in particular, where those relationships weren't as strong, and the cities were picking up a big part of the planning and the provision of after-school programs. And now the cities will not have direct access to funding. And in the past, they had applied for ACES funding as a proxy for the districts, but I'm not sure that that will continue, but it certainly doesn't apply for this new funding. So it is super confusing, and we were very happy that Josh Brady took some time to walk us through the whole thing last week.
So this is Karin Molinari from Healthy Cities, and I just wanted to share that even the districts who had plans together, so I've spoken with both Redwood City and San Carlos, they were not able to use the funds the way they had intended. And so now are reaching out to CBOs to close that gap, right? They had in Redwood City, they'd originally planned, at least for after school and extended learning, to hire retired teachers or their current teachers and pay them extra to do after school homework clubs and tutoring. And the teachers were not available or interested in doing that. And so then they reached out to us to see if we could fill that void. The unfortunate thing is that we're, up against the situation as everybody else is, of lack of volunteers or staffing. So we're doing our best to work with them on a plan for next year. But I guess I'm sharing that to say that even those districts with plans may not have been able to implement them. So I encourage everybody to reach out now, because they may need help with implementing what was supposed to be spent this year.
Yeah, and I think this is the time to do that. Like, this is the time to influence those funding. And it's something that we're right now, I'm currently working with the parents from Redwood City, and I know Catalina is as well in East Palo Alto, to make sure that we are able to influence this, because the after school programming needs a lot of support. And I think Michael Funk from the CDE, he emphasized that a lot, like the support that the after school organizations need. And this is an opportunity to get funding through districts, and also for collaboration as well. I'm going to share a link in the chat. And Petra, I asked you if it was okay, because we had this we had this webinar with Michael Funk. This was focusing on district for district staff and superintendents and boards of educations as well. We will have another one with him for nonprofits, and that's the one that I will definitely, you all are welcome to come to that webinar. But let me share the link. This is a raw video of the webinar we had with him last week. Feel free to go and watch. Some parts of the video are in Spanish. We haven't added the subtitles yet. We'll be adding them soon. But you are welcome to go and watch this video. They explain the Elo program. All the explanation about the Elo program is in English. So you can see how they explain that, how Michael Fung and his staff explain the Elo program and how it can be used in the local districts. And then we have two people sharing how they're spending this money in their districts. So I just put the link in the chat, and let me know if you can watch it or not. Yeah, I'm pretty sure the link should work. Perfect. I see some thumbs up. So
Jose, do you have a date for the nonprofit convening?
Not yet. We actually are in conversations with Michael Funk and his staff to set out the date and to have this other webinar as well.
Great. Josh Brady, I'm going to put you on the spot for just a second. Is there anything that you would like us to know? You were very kind and spoke with us last time, and I know you've been working with Karin, but.
No, I'm gonna steal Karin from all of you now, because she did a great job providing accurate information. I do know Michael has had some meetings with Jose and his team, and so definitely just encourage all of you to join where you can to get the information, to find out how to connect. Again, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. And we know that districts and LEAs can't do it on their own. And so community-based organizations are going to be crucial to providing support and enrichment opportunities. And again, I'm happy to join anytime that you guys, want. I just joined today to be a support to Karin and her team. But definitely, again, I report directly to Michael. So we work very closely together on all aspects of expanded learning. So if there's anytime you need information, reach out to myself. I've already informed Michael that I've been connecting with all of you, and he was very pleased to hear that. So thank you very much. And again, happy to just be here as support. And again, everything that Karin said and Jose said, reach out to the LEAs, right? I mean, the worst that they can tell you is no, right? And so continue to reach out, let them know what, how you can contribute to that community or to that program. And so that would just be my what I would share.
It was a request for your email address, Josh.
Yes, I'll put it in there. Yep, I'll put it in there.
Thank you. And we'll send out the slides afterwards, since Karin did such a lovely job with that graph of how much money is coming into the school districts. I think just that might be something that you might be interested in kind of having before you go and talk to the school district. Let them know that there's this big amount of funding, and that they should be able to, even if they aren't going to share it with you, they should be able to tell you what the plan is for it, because it's a really large change.
I was also, my name is Petra, I'm on the board for Thrive. And I was just thinking, as I heard people talk about reaching out to your districts and the different opportunities there, and wondering about whether or not there are opportunities to reach out collectively too. Many of the organizations here are representing similar districts and, working with similar people. And I know my mom's a former school principal, and just know how stretched she was in different directions, and then maybe a collective response might be nice, or reaching out. or even just collaborating to find out what have you heard, to get that background. So I've created a Google Doc. If anybody is interested, you can put your contact information, what districts you work with, that sort of thing. If you want to find ways to engage with each other more deeply. That's one of the things that we really hope out of this, is that we're learning with and from each other. And so, but we know that you can't do that all in a group setting with 40 people. So thought that might be helpful.
And one of the reasons we're doing this is because it is still a little bit under the radar. I reached out to a school board member thinking they would know about it, and they had no idea. So it's definitely something that it behooves us to go out and talk about it and ask people about it, because it also might not occur to the school districts that you have capacity and that you would like to be a part of the program. Anybody else have anything to add about this? Okay, well, thank you so much, Karin, for bringing this up. And we are going to have Karin back at another time to talk about the restorative justice program that they're developing. Is that appropriate?
Yes, thank you so much. And we'll be delighted to come back and share with everyone the work that we've been doing on we're calling it a youth restorative justice peer diversion program. The name is still being bandied about a bit, but the actual name of it, but that's the short descriptor.
But it's guaranteed to be long.
Yeah.
And have an acronym that goes with it, because that's what we do here. Okay, so please go ahead and put your information into the doc if you're interested in thinking about collaborating within for specific school districts. I think, as Petra said, it's really helpful to be able to go kind of as a united front and say, hey, we have capacity. If you have funding, we can help you out. So one of the things we also wanted to just briefly touch on is the summer. Some of this funding can be used for summer, if I understand correctly. So would love to know, just give an opportunity for everyone to share a bit about what your summer plans are and what stage you are in planning. And just share that for about 10-15 minutes, and then we'll move on to the American Rescue Plan funding from the county. And if you guys don't start talking, we'll do breakout rooms, and then people are just scared about sharing in a big group.
This is Evan from the Mid Peninsula Boys and Girls Club. We're just hearing from our districts about their summer plans. It sounds like a lot of districts have funding to do half-day summer camps again this year, just like last year. And so we would plan to support for the second half of the day. And we're still trying to get clarification on how long summer camps are. I think last year they were six weeks long. And so the district has given us solid times is they're going to be open from 8:30 to 7:30, and then we would support, 8:30 to 12:30, and then we would support for the afternoon program.
Thank you, Evan. Has anybody else heard from the school districts they work with and know what they're doing for the summer? I imagine that there'll be other issues with half days and short programs.
Hi, this is Elizabeth with Boys and Girls Clubs of the Peninsula. I'm their grants manager, so I don't know all the details at all of what they're planning for the summer, but just based on last summer and what I know the goal is that last summer we partnered very closely with the Ravenswood District and Redwood City to provide in-person summer full-day programs for K through 8. And I know that's always our goal to do that again. We provided the bulk of the funding with the Ravenswood District. They provided most of the teachers, but we did the rest. And Ravenswood, I believe we did sort of a cost share with them. So I would imagine with this additional funding, something like that would be the goal again, but I can't speak to it in any more detail because I haven't had any discussions right now with what the plans are.
Thank you. We're going to do a quick breakout sessions just for 10 minutes so everybody can share in a smaller group. And then we'll come back and hear from the county, from Peggy Jensen and Margot Gould. So Kirsten, can you do breakout rooms for us? Do 6 of them? And the goal is just to share more casually.
If anyone is having issues joining a breakout room, let me know.
Welcome back to the main room. I hope everyone enjoyed having just a little bit of smaller group time because it's so hard to get that now that we're all in the virtual world. It's just a chance to deepen some relationships and really hear about what's going on. Does anybody have anything that they want to share out that happened in their room that was just interesting? Doesn't have to be, but. Okay, great. So next on the agenda is we're going to talk about the American Rescue Plan funding. So this is part of the reason we're doing this is because all these different funding streams are confusing. So the one we were talking about before is coming from the state and goes to the school districts. The one we're going to talk about now starts nationally from the American Rescue Plan, comes to the county, and then the county decides how to spend it. So it's a completely different pot, completely different use. And in order to explain that well, we have invited Peggy Jensen, who's the assistant county manager. She's had a promotion since last time she was here, so congratulations, Peggy. And then also Margot Gould, who's a consultant for the County of San Mateo and who is working specifically on the COVID recovery initiative. So they'll give us an overview and then we'll have some time for questions. So Peggy, you're on mute.
There we go. Okay, we have a slide deck to share with you. First of all, thank you, Petra and Georgia, for inviting us today. I just want to confirm that my colleague Margot is on the call. I don't see her, but Margot, if you could just chime in and let me know you're here so I don't start without you.
So we jumped the gun by a couple of minutes. It's possible she's not.
Okay. Well, why don't I get started? I'm presenting the first part of our presentation. Margot is presenting the second. So I can give you the background and then Margot will go into the details. So I'm pleased to be here today to share with you our preliminary ARPA plan for children's initiatives. Next slide, please. So just as a reminder to those of you who may not have been familiar with the ARPA funds, which are the American Rescue Plan Act funds that the county has received, as have most other government agencies. There are 4 permitted uses. The first, as you can see, is responding to the public health emergency and the negative economic impacts by providing assistance to households, small businesses, nonprofits, and industries. The second is premium pay to essential workers. The third is replacing private sector revenue. The county could use this money to replace funds that we have lost due to the pandemic. And then finally, you can invest in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. That is also an allowed use. The work that we have been doing in the county, both with the initial money we received in the CARES Act prior to the adoption of ARPA, has primarily gone to fund programs and activities related to the first category of permitted uses, assisting households, small businesses, nonprofits, and industries in terms of workforce development. What I wanted you all to know is that these funds, we have a team of about 3 lawyers and probably as many, if not more, accountants who review every allocation, every expenditure that the county proposes with ARPA funds, just because it's very complicated and we need to make sure that we're using this money appropriately. Next slide, please. So maybe that's the second slide. I thought there was a slide before that and we skipped one. No? Okay, I guess we did, and then one of the slides dropped out. But what I would like to tell you is about the total amount of ARPA funding that we have received. The county allocation was $150 million. That allocation was divided into 2 pots. The first half of that, $74.5 million, was received by the county last May. Of that $74.5 million, all but $10 million has been spent. That remaining $10 million needs to be spent, or not spent, but actually under contract, obligated by May 15th. That's an extremely important date and extremely important activity for us, because the second tranche, the second pot of money, the second $74.5 million, we cannot receive that second allocation unless all of our first tranche, all of our first round of funding has been spent. That second tranche of funding, that can be allocated up to over the next two years. So there is time for planning and allocating those funds. Now, in terms of, so we have $10 million left of the first tranche, and we've got $74 million remaining. So we have a total of $84.5 million to look at and to plan for, to give our board of supervisors some plans or some options for allocating those funds. Now, the process we used to develop an allocation plan started out with a review of our 2020 Recovery Strategic Initiative Plan. And the focus areas that included childcare and also extended learning, along with things like housing, workforce development, assistance to small business, mental health, and those were the primary areas, also food security. So we went back and looked at what had been recommended and not done, and not accomplished in the first round. So we put those items in a bucket. Then the next step we took was that we wanted to update our recovery priorities. Some of you may have participated in the development of recovery priorities way back, starting in 2020, early 2020. And we identified the areas that I just mentioned as the priority recovery areas, the areas where we should invest in to build back a better community. Our goal this time was funding assistance from the Silicon Valley Community Foundation, was to go out to those communities, to our BIPOC communities, to our communities most impacted by the pandemic, and really query them, ask them what it was, what are their current needs? Have their needs changed from our first round of inquiries? Or is there something that's coming up for them? The Gardner Foundation, or the Gardner Center at Stanford was our partner in doing this work, and it was led by our county equity officer, Shireen Malikafazi. The work that they did included a survey with, I think, over 1,000 respondents in multiple languages. There were town halls, a variety of focus groups were held, and there were also poster boards posted up in community locations throughout the county. One of them was actually down in Pescadero in the gas station taco restaurant, but other locations throughout the county. what we heard from the Gardner Center was that the priorities really haven't changed from the past. And the highest priority for people was housing security. There was mental health concerns, but most of the mental health concerns were about anxiety around housing security and food security. It wasn't that people didn't feel they had access to food, they just were anxious that they would continue to have access to enough food for their families. There was also mention about childcare. It was primarily an issue of more affluent families or relatively affluent families, because many families who are lowest income residents, they have family members, either other adult relatives or actually older children who've been taking care of their children during the pandemic or during the period of time when school wasn't in session. So anyway, we got feedback on the priorities and childcare, housing, mental health, and workforce development, getting people back into good jobs were all high priorities. Next, we took those priorities and with the assistance of the Boston Consulting Group, which was also funded by the Silicon Valley Community Foundation, we gathered partners and providers together. I know some of you participated in in a forum that we had around extended learning about aftercare, and identified what were the most effective ways to achieve the goals that the community had identified with the remaining funds, ARPA funds that we have. From putting together the Gardner work, the work done by the Boston Consulting Group and all of the community partners and providers, we developed a draft preliminary allocation plan for that $84.5 million. And then finally, because of the timeframes for that remaining $10 million, we lifted up the immediate opportunities and identified those as part of our $10 million remaining tranche. And as you'll see from our timeline, we'll be taking to that plan to the board pretty quickly because we know we need to get going on that work. Next slide, please. So what you have before you is a pie chart that shows the general proposed allocation based upon the Gardner Center work, the Boston Consulting Group, input from the community, from our community partners and providers. And what you see is that we've set aside 24% of these funds, about $20 million for the county manager and the board of supervisors to identify specific proposals or projects they want to work on. The largest component of the money, the largest chunk of the money is 32% dedicated to housing, because that was the highest priority identified by community members. You'll see the next highest is our portfolio for children, which includes both childcare and extended learning. There's also money set aside for workforce, helping people who have been displaced by the pandemic get back into the workforce, help those who want to move on to a career path with a career ladder with better pay and better benefits. That's also part of the workforce work. A significant amount of money set aside for small business. We've been assisting small business throughout the pandemic, but we know more is needed. Digital equity is another component of this. And we've also included some money to do some pilot work to try to test and learn in a couple of areas going forward. So that's the general concept of the general allocation for this $84.5 million. Next slide, please. And now I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Margot Grant-Gould, who will dive deeply into the $13.5 million that's been set aside for children's initiatives. Is Margot here?
Oh. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Are folks able to hear me on the line? Fantastic. Thanks so much for the opportunity to come here and to present about the proposed children's portfolio as it relates to the American Rescue Plan Act funding for San Mateo County. So what I'll go ahead and do is, Peggy had mentioned this a little bit earlier, that the children's portfolio here that we want to dive in a little bit deeper into, describe what is included in this package that totals $13.5 million. We had worked with two different stakeholder groups to arrive at this kind of total children's package. This is both inclusive of childcare, really looking at children 0 to 5 and their unique needs before they enter into the K-12 system, but then also looking at extended learning and how that relates to young children and school-age children in the form of after school, extended learning programs, and then summer school programs themselves. If you could go to the next slide, please. So I think the first place to start as it relates to this portfolio are just the key goals that we are looking to achieve when we are crafting and working with partners across the field to better understand what the exact needs were. So I think first and foremost, the #1 goal that we are looking to achieve through this portfolio was able to stabilize the field and create that solid foundation to be able to provide the programs both for childcare and for school-aged children. We know that these are industries and fields that have been hit incredibly hard by the COVID pandemic, and we simply wanted to prevent additional closures. I know for children 0 to 5, we've seen some studies that have shown that up to 67 licensed childcare providers have closed throughout the pandemic in San Mateo County, and really just being able to create that solid foundation and field to ensure that their doors remain open and serving children and families was just a critical first step to be able to do anything moving ahead. So that was number one. Second, a critical piece of the overall portfolio and a goal was to start to build capacity to increase supply. And I really mean this in kind of its most infancy and beginning stages, to begin to build capacity, really knowing and highlighting that the fields, both childcare and extended learning, have been incredibly, they were oversubscribed before COVID. There were wait lists that were exacerbated kind of pre-pandemic, and knowing these have only grown worse over time. So making those initial seed investments to begin looking and tackling the overall capacity across the field. But then also recognizing that in order to meet capacity, this is going to be looking at both kind of increasing supply in terms of facility and programs that serve children, but then also looking at the workforce components that we know continue to hinder so many to be able to continue to operate or be able to open up new programs themselves. The third primary goal of the overall children's portfolio was supporting the social emotional development and learning enrichment opportunities for young children. This is a place that really came in direct response to COVID. We've seen numerous national studies that have shown either learning setbacks, learning loss, and the overall social emotional needs of young children as it relates to the pandemic, and knowing how these could be enhanced and integrated across different programs was a key priority that the county wanted to focus in on. And then last but not least, we are really looking to how to leverage state and federal funds across all system areas, I have to say, but a key place where this continued to come up was really in two key areas around how to improve affordability of childcare and extended learning programs, and ultimately with the goal of improving access to these programs. So again, I think just mainly this last piece is a place that we recognize is going to be a significant barrier to families to access programs across childcare and extended learning fields, but also recognizing the fact that this is going to take much more kind of sustainable funding sources beyond ARPA in the term of ongoing state and federal support, both of which exist today and those that may materialize in due time. I do want to highlight that. Can we go to the next slide, please? So what does this look like in the actual portfolio that's being proposed that will go before the Board of Supervisors? So first, what we're looking at is a portfolio for childcare that was looking at a total of a $7 million investment. And this was looking in a few key areas here. First and foremost, we are looking at stabilizing and even some capacity building for family childcare provider grants. There's actually a grant program that is out in the field right now through Build Up San Mateo County. It was a grant program that was oversubscribed in terms of the number of family childcare providers who wanted to participate. And so it's an immediate need that the field has identified in San Mateo County to be able to infuse funds to, again, stabilize and even look at capacity building specifically in the infant toddler realm, which we know is incredibly expensive and also incredibly difficult to be able to find and obtain within the childcare field. Second, we're looking at operating grants for childcare providers across centers and, again, family childcare homes, really from the standpoint of how to stabilize the programs that exist today, really looking at the ability to stabilize the workforce to ensure retention of the workforce that continue to operate in these programs day in and day out. And then lastly, we're looking at technical assistance for childcare center and facilities development. And this is, again, kind of done through the Build Up San Mateo County perspective, but looking at some additional possibilities to see further development of sites that could offer such programs. And then for the extended learning package, we're proposing a pretty similar package for the extended learning field, totaling $6.5 million. This funding would be seeded on a slightly different timeline. Much of it would be front loaded to be part of that tranche 1 funding that Peggy had described up top at the beginning of the presentation, in order to really jumpstart summer learning hubs to be offered this upcoming summer and summer 2022. And then we'll be offering we are proposing to offer another round of operating support funds to expand access to after school programs and summer learning programs in the out years, starting in fiscal year 2022, 2023, and to expand. And really so much of these operating grants would be doing a few different things, but trying to expand access to programs, perhaps expand length of times in which they are operating, but then also really trying to build in with the design to methodically think through how to enhance social emotional development supports within these programs, and also how to incorporate things like learning enrichment into the programs as well to ensure that they are meeting the needs of children and families. And then last but not least, I know it's not on the slide, but I do want to highlight that so much of this work, again, does hinge on workforce development. So a piece that we are thinking through as it relates to both childcare and extended learning, but really a broader array of workforce supports, is part of that overall workforce package that is part of a different portfolio. But as we think about displaced workers, we know that a high demand field for additional workforce supports is going to be in these two fields. How do we recruit more childcare providers? How do we continue to look for and recruit new after school program providers to serve in these programs themselves? So that is an overall strategy. It's just simply located in a different kind of component of the overall ARPA proposal itself. So with that, can we go to the next slide, please? Next step. Peggy, do you want me to go ahead and take this one?
Sure, if you'd like, or I can do that. I mean, whatever you prefer.
Perfect. In terms of just next steps, to quickly run through these, and these were quickly alluded to as well. Our next meeting with the Equity Recovery Group is on January 27th, coming up next Friday, to be able to continue to seek and solicit input, just as we're doing in this community meeting right now. We are planning to go to the Board of Supervisors on February 8th in order to discuss the proposal for that first tranche of funding to be able to spend and to commit that remaining 10 million that remains in the first tranche of the ARPA portfolio. And then from there on, the second tranche of funding will be considered by the Board of Supervisors early in the spring as they continue to iterate that larger $75 million portfolio. All of this is expected to roll out coming in summer 2022. So these are kind of the next few steps that we have in mind, and happy to answer any questions that folks may have or provide any additional clarity into the points that we have discussed here today.
What's the RCC meeting?
I apologize. That was my error. That I should have taken that off that slide. The RCC is our County Recovery Coordination Council, and they have had the same presentation that you had last Friday.
So then my follow-up question would be, how would CBOs participate and share information as to what would be helpful for their programs to grow and be able, specifically speaking from my background, which is providing free tutoring to students in need based on their teachers' referrals. How do you recommend that we get in touch?
So how do you get input into the process, or how do you find out about when the grants are available, or both question?
Both.
Okay. So the county has a group of folks who are working on this process. We did last year in 2020, there was both a round of grants for childcare providers and also for learning hubs. So we have put together a process that in last year that we're going to be reviewing. Internally, we have a group of experts that we're working with who will be reviewing the applications from last year, identifying what needs might have changed, how that application might be tweaked. And then we will be sharing that widely through Thrive and other organizations to make sure that everyone knows that the grants are available.
Any more questions? No.
Sorry, to clarify, are you saying that there will not be new grant applications? You'll just consider the applications from last year?
No. What I'm saying is that we have an application that we're going to review and update, and there will be a new application. But we're hoping that doesn't take a long time to develop it, since we've had a process in the past that we're just going to be refining. But there will be a new application.
I sort of vaguely recall that application, but we didn't apply, so I'm a little fuzzy. Could you tell us something about that? Is it like maybe specifically, does it require certified teachers? Can it be community members who aren't teachers?
Paige, I know that you asked that question before. I will check with our staff. That Linda Wolin, who is on this call, and I don't want to put Linda on the spot, but I know that she was more involved in that specific application. I was involved on the final review team, but I don't know whether that was required. We will I have that on my take back list to talk to our group, along with, there were a couple of other questions that came out of our small group.
So I can try to respond, and also Heather Hopkins from Community Equity Collaborative, I may defer to her as well. But there are some baseline requirements that we have to reconsider and figure out. By the way, I'm with Supervisor Dave Pine's office on the County Board of Supervisors, and I'll be working with Peggy and her team to be implementing the program once the board approves it, which is hoped for the beginning of February. So I believe it was not a requirement to have certified teachers, but we did want to focus and prioritize organizations that were serving the most at-risk groups of kids. And there's 100 different ways you could define what that means, the most at-risk kids, but we use some criteria such as percentage of free and reduced lunch, number of foster kids that are served, homeless, maybe special needs. There were some criteria like that. That was not a requirement that organizations are serving those kids, but if you are serving those kids, you kind of get points, and that application might be prioritized, assuming all the other criteria were met. But generally, as grants go, I think the idea would be to make the application process as smooth and quote unquote easy for you all to complete, because it's not to make a burdensome application process. I mean, we want to be mindful of taxpayer dollars, but we also want to get the money to the organizations that are doing the work as quickly as possible under the constraints that Peggy described, the timeline constraints. So hopefully that answered part of, I think it was Paige's question.
Yeah, thanks very much, Linda. I just saw that Heather confirmed that teacher certification was not a requirement in the last grant. She confirmed that in chat.
And do I recall that last year this was all virtual? It wasn't in person?
The programs, no, a lot of that was kind of the point for the learning hubs. This was sort of the end of last spring, beginning of last summer. It was when schools were still mostly engaged in distance learning, but the community, the CBOs were still offering in-person opportunities for the kids. So they were doing, the reason it was called Learning Hub is because the organizations were supporting the distance learning for the kids. So they basically do Zoom school from the community center. And we were trying to support that. So they were in person, but in terms of your opportunity to communicate with the county or that kind of thing, or these kind of fora, those were virtual.
Oh, I just remembered what it was. It was during the school day, right? It wasn't after school, it was during the school day. I think that was why we didn't apply. Do you know, is it after school this year, or is it going to be school day?
So that was specific to that period of time when most of the schools were distance. Kids needed some specific support for that. So that was a learning hub model. This is more extended learning, and we keep struggling with the definition of what that means, but I think all of the programs that you all are representing, so after school programs, summer programs, tutoring, like that's all part of extended learning. The focus of this first tranche, as Peggy described, would be on supporting programs during summer 2022. And I think the second tranche, also described in the presentation, would be for the following school year, the 22-23 school year, and the following summer.
Yeah. I mean, thanks, Linda. That's really great detail. The other thing that I would add, just in terms of the money for this summer, one of the things we heard loud and clear from everyone was the need, as Margot talked about, for supporting social emotional learning, helping kids get more prepared, catch up, if you will, on SEL skills. And that's what we see this summer about. It's learning, but it's also just being in an environment where that social emotional development can be supported and occur.
Just one last thing, I'll quickly chime in and just provide a little bit more context too. I think that yes, we were, as Linda alluded to, we've been talking about like, what is the name for this? And for more better or worse, we've landed on extended learning. If there's a better name, please do chime in. I think that the other piece, just in terms of how to think about the programs, it's what are the programs that are serving children during non-instructional minutes in school time? That is really kind of the goal of who this is trying to reach at this phase.
Yeah. And I would just, to echo one thing that Linda said, the set aside, this $10 million in this first pool of this first tranche of money that we got from the federal government, the ARPA fund, that was set aside to achieve equity goals. And Linda's point about how this money will be targeted to those communities that have been hit hardest by the pandemic, that have the lowest incomes relative to the rest of the county, who have children that are socially disadvantaged. That's where we're going to be targeting this money. This point system that Linda mentioned will prioritize, as she said, those programs.
So I'm sorry. Oh, go ahead, Paige.
Just one more quick question. The age range, is it different than the ELO? Does it go beyond 6th grade?
Paige, when we asked that, I'm not sure. I think when we talked about this whole children's portfolio, we were thinking 0 to 13, right, Margot?
I think that we were emphasizing the need for younger children, but then also recognizing that there are unique needs that also happen with older high school age students as well. And so if there's an application that comes in that has a specific need and that is serving a very specific population, I think that that's probably a good fit for the portfolio. So probably 0 to 18 with a big emphasis on some of those early years, just recognizing that especially the social emotional development supports are critical during those time periods.
This is Karin, and I don't want to get into, too far into the weeds because my question is detailed. Is it, would it be okay, Margot, to contact you directly for follow-up questions? Specifically, I run after school tutoring program that serves high-risk kids in the Redwood City School District.
At this point, we don't have the program completely designed because we don't have the authority from the board to go forward with it yet. So, if you have specific questions, or if any of you have specific questions or comments, if you want to funnel them through Petra, if that's all right with you, Petra, we'd be happy to consider them and include them in our FAQs when we put the grant program together.
Great. Or if we know Board of Supervisors, we can just advocate directly with them, right?
Well, anyone has the opportunity to come speak before the board.
So make a point to, through Petra and through the mailing list for this Children in Education tag, to make sure you're all aware of when the board meeting, when the board will be considering this program, and approximately, to the best of our ability, what time that would be, so that you can, if people want to participate and advocate at that time, that you would be most welcome to do that.
Is that possible to give some estimate of the pay to the program? Because we're a program provider, so we hope to be able to understand what's usually the pay rate, like per student cost, hourly cost, or per group cost, what the county would support in general. This is Eli.
I think I understand the question. I think it's still TBD as this program gets developed. But one model would be to do kind of flat rate grants to organizations, and another would be per student. And I think I would say staff is still working on that, and that will be made clear in the application how you allocate, how you would present yourself and your program proposal.
Yeah, I would offer, thanks, Linda. I would offer that Margot or I can come back to this group once all these details have been worked out, and we'd be happy to share that with you all.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. It seems to be that people are excited about you coming back, talking more about the details, but it's great to just get to this point where we know kind of what's coming up, what's on their radar, so that people can think about putting together applications. And with that, I want to thank you so much, both Peggy and Margot, for being here and for sharing with the group. I think it was very valuable, and we will continue to communicate about this as we move forward, as soon as we get more updates, as soon as this moves along further. So thank you guys so much, everybody, for being here and for the presentations, and have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.